All right, this is a Cheese Cheese on post T2 Eco and some comparisons. It's just also just me delaying going through the FAF Eco Compendium in a video, but this is a piece of it. So traditional wisdom states that you should ring most of your T2 mexes before you start going T3. And I've had people tell me, like, try to flame me for doing upgrading to T3 or doing the Control K trick, and I'm just gonna break down why exactly with numbers, the difference between all this. So we're gonna and this needs to be controlled, and we're just gonna assume this game state, and obviously things are different in a lot of different game states. We're gonna assume that you have mass to upgrade and without stalling, and we're gonna assume that you have, five T3 engineers to do the reclaim trick, and then something like 16 T1 engineers, which would be equivalent like 6 T2 or 3 T2 and 8 T1, something like that, to do traditional like clicking on ring mexes to upgrade them to T3, or divvying them up and doing T, divvying them up and ringing, unring T2. And this will, this spreadsheet on the side. Now, I know no one likes spreadsheets, but it's important to understand this game is a game of math, and you'll see, you spend mass and you earn mass, especially with ecoing. So for this example, we're going to do the reclaim trick with 5 T3 engineers versus upgrading. And you should see that this is going to take 18 seconds to finish. And then we'll break down what the earning and the spend is. So this is done. And 18, 19 seconds. And this is going to take about 30 seconds. So this is all well and good. But what does this actually mean? What does this result in the numbers? So because this mex got destroyed, we forewent the gains of the 9 mass per second in exchange for 649 reclaim. And you can see in this column here, make this bigger and zoom in. People are going to be watching this on phones or tiny screens. So you see here, this column is the reclaim earned for the 5 T3 engineers. And in the first second, they ate that max in like 1 second, because 5 T3 engineers have 162.5 build power. Build power is can reclaim 5 mass a second, so 162.5 times 5. They ate that max in 1 second. Versus, when a max is upgrading, it's still making income, even when it's, so you see here, this is, plus 9. I start upgrading. It's minus 18. That is including the plus 9, because it's really more like minus 25, I think. Or minus 16, minus like 27. We'll pause that. So, and this first column is the earning on the 16 engineers upgrading the mechs. And you see that it took 32 seconds. And in that time, 31 seconds, 30 seconds, excuse me. And in that time, that mechs made 270 income. So basically, it's very important to finish the mechs as soon as possible, to get T3 as soon as possible, and to use the reclaim. So you get, this is a this looks like, okay, great. I made like a 500 mass difference here between 18 seconds, 18 seconds. But really, because you got the earnings earlier, that this started going up plus 27 for a fully completed mex, ends up being closer to 700 difference. So it's huge. The difference is huge. And also, you can do this in 18 seconds. And, if I wanted to take these engineers and spend the equivalent of 4,600 mass, which is the cost of a T3 mex, on storages, I would need to, get 23 storages down. And that's not really that feasible. So if you look, in maybe the perfect world, you have something like this. Um, with your engineers are already, when usually they're not distributed like so generally, already perfectly lined up. You're still your return on investment is going to be better by just having by doing group of engineers and getting T3 mexes one at a time uh, with the reclaim trick. So you see here, this column is what's going on in this scenario. That you are, and we're going to count the earnings from one mex and the storages to keep it controlled. Um, we'll see. So it's 6:15, and we'll see when this finishes. That my calculation has it at you know done in 60 seconds, but it's going to take longer because these engineers aren't going to have anything to build once they're done. So it's going to be on these two engineers to do it. And you see that, you're gradually increasing the income as storages get complete. You see this is when 5 storages get complete, your income goes up 3.75 around the T2 max, and then it goes up another 3.75. So that's why, if you're in a position where you are at generally, if you're in a position where you don't have 6,000 mass in the bank, doing something like this is the right way to do it because you're getting that increased income the whole time. You see, it's been over a minute and these guys aren't quite done yet. And to keep it controlled, it needs to be 23, not 24. So you see, it's took about a minute 15. And even if we assume that we had perfect build power and that all these engines could constantly contribute to a storage they couldn't, you get to the completed point. You'd get to your 6,300 mass spend at 1 minute, and you'd have your earnings at that 1 minute at 1,034, which is markedly worse than the earnings and payback of those 5 T3 engineers being concentrated and doing the reclaim trick. That's a 700 mass difference at 1 minute. And yeah, so and also let's just show the worst way to do things is just a normal, passive upgrade of a T3 max. And you'll see, this is obviously one of the worst ways to do it because you can see in this column J, you see your earnings never increase because you don't finish the max until 191 seconds, if I remember right. 192 seconds. So you're way behind everything else. And then to illustrate the point that, ringing a bunch of T2 maxes is okay, is generally okay, especially compared to this, is you see the mass spend on this passive upgrade is 15, because it costs 9. If the mex wasn't producing anything, it would be minus 24, but it's including the plus 9. So you're spending 24 mass a second. So if you did that equivalent of, hey, we're going to do T3 engineers, excuse me, 25 mass spent equivalent on ringing mexes, which is sort of awkward and I think it's sort of impossible to do because I think technically a T1 engineer spends 1 mass a second building a storage. Excuse me, 4 mass a second building a storage. So you need like 600. Yeah, you can 4 mass a second. So you get really close 24. But we're just gonna, try to keep it sort of equivalent because it's easier to do the calculations. Completing a max every 8 seconds. Excuse me, completing a max storage every 8 seconds. Now you see that the earnings here are going up constantly every time a new max is complete. Which is the passive upgrade, which is the same mass spend. So that's how you end up with a very different uh, total spend at the end. You're done 8 seconds earlier, and you're made 1,300, and then by here you double the mass spend difference. So this is sort of ramblings. So a little bit of explaining the sheet, which I made for my own little edification. And at some point, I will be going through the FAF Eco Compendium here, but just a lot of bullshit, and it's not a lot of bullshit, but it's just a lot of little points, and I think it's generally easier to just read through. But when I send friends and clanmates this, they tend not to ignore it. They tend to ignore it and then still try to flame me on different, like, how my eco isn't done right when they have no math and no backup to their opinions. So yeah, there's my salty little rant on how to do T2 eco, and uh also here's another example. We just split this into a bunch of groups and try to ring all these mexes. That's already with perfect spread. But generally the engineers aren't perfectly spread like this. This may take longer than a minute. And using 4 more engineers than this of just concentrating. So if you have the mass, getting a T3 mex while you have almost all T2s is not terrible. And this isn't even considering that 4 T3 mechs in your base are generally safer than 1 T3 mechs in your base generally safer than like 23 storages on the front lines. But yeah,